Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Principal Podcast. Today's guest is Reggie Rivers. Reggie's got a pretty diverse background that I'll let him dive into in a sec here. But the reason that I wanted to talk to him is because of goal setting and achieving your goals, right? So we're always taught write down your goals in a notebook each morning or listen to affirmations about your goals, and that's how you can achieve them. But Reggie did a TED Talk a few years ago that completely ignores this conventional wisdom and advises people to do the exact opposite. And today, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So, Reggie, it's a pleasure. Thank you for coming on, and feel free to dive in and just give us a little overview of your background.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate you having me. I'm Reggie Rivers. I'm a former Denver Broncos running back. Played for the Broncos for 6 years back in the 1990s. Before that, I was at Texas State University. Grew up down in San Antonio in a mostly military family, and so we moved around quite a bit, but spent most of our time in Texas. After my NFL career, I became a broadcaster. So I worked in radio, TV, and newspaper for about 20 years. I've written 6 books, and I'm a motivational speaker. And I love the topic of goal setting. And the TED Talk that you're referring to, the title was, If You Want to Achieve Your Goals, Don't Focus on Them. And it is counterintuitive, and we can get more into that as we go along.
Awesome, Reggie. I'm excited. I think two things. One, you've got a really diverse background. I mean, you played in the NFL, then you went into broadcasting and radio and TV, and you've written 6 books, as you mentioned. So that's awesome. And we definitely want to cover all of that. But also, it seems like, you're not only a motivational speaker just because you have a good personality for it, you've actually accomplished quite a bit in your life. So let's dive in. So talk a little bit about your time on the Denver Broncos, if you could.
Sure. To play NFL football is the dream of a lot of young people. And so, of course, I dreamed of that when I was a kid. But even as a kid, I was pretty realistic. So I didn't actually dream about playing in the NFL. I just kind of vaguely thought, hey, it'd be cool to play in the NFL. It wasn't until I was 22, my senior year in college, that a scout came in and said, hey, you're having a great year. You keep this up, you might be able to play at the next level. And I was an undrafted free agent. So I went to the Denver Broncos and tried out, and it was the joy of my life. It was such an adventure. I was around some of the most accomplished, talented people I have ever been around in my entire life. Some of the most confident, physically confident. Like, we know confident people, but I met some guys who were just so confident about what their bodies could do physically that it was astounding. It was like, wow. And I just feel like I learned a lot from being in the NFL. I learned a lot about what great players look like, what's the difference between them and the rest of us. I learned a lot about leadership and how coaches lead when in some cases, they have very little authority. Like a position coach has very little authority, but a lot of power. And, just understanding how is it that people lead through that. So, for me, being in the NFL was just really a lot of fun to get to play this game, and a lot of learning on many different levels.
It sounds like being surrounded by people who were obviously disciplined and were obviously motivated, but that environment kind of uplifted you further in your professional career.
I would definitely say so, because we all know what we are personally doing, but it's not until you meet other people and you see what they're doing, and especially if you see somebody who's similar to you in many ways, but they're doing a little bit better than you are. And you're like, why is this guy stronger than me in the weight room? What's he doing that I'm not doing? We're the same. Why is this guy faster than me? Why is this guy a better blocker than me? And you start to, understand the difference between you and them. And sometimes you realize, well, it's just God-given talent that this guy has and I don't have. I can live with that. I can live with the reality. I'm not going to be able to outrun Usain Bolt. That's a reality. But then sometimes you realize, oh, I've got some habits that he doesn't have that are holding me back, or he has some habits that I don't have that are holding me back. And so I think the NFL was a great place for me to really incubate these thoughts and learn from those guys.
And at the beginning of when you first started describing your like how you got into your professional career of playing in the NFL, you said that you grew up playing football, but it wasn't necessarily your goal. And it's funny that you say that because, of the whole goal setting conversation and the TED talk that you delivered. So I mean, Was it truly like when you were a kid, you were just like, you know what, I'm just gonna work hard every day. I'm gonna be in the weight room. I'm gonna stay extra for practices and do all these things, eat right, etc. Um, with no goal of actually playing in the NFL. You just wanted to, see how good you could be, or what was it?
Yeah, I the basic premise of my TED Talk is that goals are things that are largely outside of our control. And for the sake of your audience, a simple way to think about what's in your control or what's not in your control, everybody snap your fingers. Okay, if you snap your fingers, that's something that's in your control. Raise your hand. Blink one eye. All of those things are behaviors. Those are things that are directly in your control. You can do it. You don't need the help of anyone else. Goals is everything else. Anything that you want to achieve, but you can't do it right now. If I said, everybody, lose 5 pounds, right? That's not something that you can just do on the spot. That makes it a goal. It's outside of your control. We tend to think that we have more control over the future than we do because we have calendars. We make, we buy plane tickets. We make hotel reservations. We plan to go on vacation. We're going on vacation in June. It's only March. We're going on vacation. But we know intuitively that anything can happen between now and March and June to stop that from happening. Pandemic could surge up again. We could get sick. We could die. Anything could happen between now and then. So we don't actually have control over these things that happen in the future. So your question for me is, what did I do to keep myself motivated? I set goals, but they're very short. They're like, I had goals about, I want to do well this week in my game on Friday night when I was in high school. And so I've got to work hard on Wednesday. I've got to work hard on Thursday. I'm not thinking about the NFL. I'm thinking about having a good game this week. And then the next week, I'm trying to think about, how do I have a good game this week? How do I get all my homework done this week? How do I do the things that are in my immediate present? And to me, that's the secret to achieving your goals long term. You have to keep your focus really short on the behaviors that you're going to act on.
That's really interesting. That's the way you put it there, because um, at least in school, or from like my own personal mentors, I've always been taught, you want to think 6 months out, you want to think a year out, and then you want to have a 5-year plan, right? But what you're saying is a lot can change in 6 months, a lot can change in a year, a lot can change in 5 years. You have kind of no predictability over what can happen from a macro perspective, but also you can't control the other individuals that are involved in that equation, right? And so what you're saying is just focus on the near term, focus on the next day, focus on the week.
Right. Correct.
Right.
I think it's good to set 6 month goals, year goals, 5 year goals, 10 year goals. I think those are very positive things. I think forward thinking and envisioning where you want to be is very positive. But if you stop there, then I think you have very little chance of ever achieving those goals. After you set those goals, then you got to get really local to the time right now and say, what can I do today, tomorrow, and this week that's going to help me move in that direction? It's not going to help me achieve that goal. I'm not going to achieve it this week, but am I moving in the direction of that goal? And I think that long term goal setting also has to be really flexible, because sometimes you can get so locked in on, I want to do this one thing, that's all that matters to me, this one thing. And opportunity after opportunity is showing up in your life, but you don't see them because you're so laser focused on the one thing. My life has branched in so many different directions, and I've had opportunities, and I feel like I maintained a flexibility to be attendant to the opportunities that show up unexpectedly.
Got it. So you would say, based on that last point there, when you say, if you're too focused, if you're hyper focused on a goal that might be 2 or 3 years out, then you're kind of going to ignore the opportunities that come your way, along that path of getting to that final goal. Would you say that you've generally been more reactive in your own life in responding to things, and like kind of just jumping on opportunities as you see them? Because that's a really interesting take, actually.
It has been, and that's for sure how my life has gone. Like, I didn't have a long term plan to be in the NFL, but when the opportunity showed up in my life, I was ready, and I said, "Yeah, I'll go do that." I didn't. I was a journalism major in college, working in newspaper journalism. I didn't do any training in TV or radio, but when the opportunity to go into radio and TV showed up, I was ready. I didn't train to be a motivational speaker, but when the opportunity came, I did it. I didn't train to write a book, but when the opportunity, and so for me, that's we have to find our way. This blend of we know where we're going, we're trying to get there, but our personal GPS is going. There's going to be detours. There's going to be interesting side roads that are still going to move in kind of the direction that we're trying to go, but it's a little bit of a departure for the path. And we have to have some mental flexibility to be able to recognize that when it shows up and act on it.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point actually, because I've just I feel like everything I see these days is like people have ADD, people can't focus on what their main drivers and what their main goal is, and they just keep hopping around and trying different things. But that's a really unique take. So like what I'd like to understand is like how did you, so you were a journalism major, you played professional football. When did the broadcasting opportunity come about?
It came up by I got interviewed in the locker room with the Broncos my rookie year,
Yeah.
and I was articulate and I was willing to be interviewed. And so the very next year, I got invited to be a regular guest host once a week on a show called Broncos Beat on the CBS network here. And I just said yes. I didn't have any TV training. I just said yes. And, I say yes a lot. I believe in it as a kind of a mantra that yes before no. Yeah, why not try and do these things? And I get, that what you're talking about people being so scattered that they have no direction and they're just jump from this, jump from that, jump to this, jump to that. Yeah, there's a danger in doing that too. But I think if you have some overall projection of I'm heading in this direction, and anything that's still leading me in that direction, I'm gonna be open to explore that idea. And for me, it kind of comes from I was a running back in the NFL and running back in college and a running back in high school. So every play starts off with a plan. It's like Reggie, the quarterback is going to hand you the ball, and we want you to run through the B gap. So that's the gap between the guard and the tackle on the right hand side. We are blocking it to create an opening in the defense in that gap. That's where you're going to go. Well, as soon as the snap happens, the defense does whatever they're going to do. He hands me the ball. So should I just stay on the plan that we had?
Mhm.
No. My job is to react to what happens, ignore the plan. Hey, that B gap is closed. I've got to cut back and go through the A gap. And as soon as I make that cut to go through the A gap, I stop thinking about what the original plan was. It's irrelevant. I'm now in the A gap. And now I'm going upfield and I've got a linebacker. What am I going to do? Am I going to go left, right, or am I going to lower my shoulder? I decide to go right. As soon as I make that step, I stop thinking about the decisions that have come behind. I don't spend any time regretting the path that I'm on. I'm just laser focused on this is the path that I've chosen. I got to get as far as I can right now. And I feel like that's a metaphor for the way you have to deal with some of the options that you have in life is that you make a decision, live with it, move forward, put your energy into it, get as much forward progress. Don't take a step and like, well, you know what? I wonder if I should have made a different cut
Uh-huh.
back there.
Uh-huh.
Life is going to tackle you. It won't wait for you to revisit those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's actually rarely where the problem lies, right? Like you might have two paths, right? And you decide on one, and then you think about, man, would I be in a better position now if I had gone the other way, right? If I had stuck with plan A instead of going this different route, would I be in a better position? So that decision fatigue almost kind of puts you in a worse position. Um, so I
Yeah.
think that's a really cool metaphor to apply that to just decision making overall with your general life.
Right. Yeah.
Would you say that's kind of been how you've handled things?
Yeah, it really is. I have very few regrets. Doesn't mean that I've made perfect decisions. I mean, there's plenty of decisions that I think, well, if I had it to do over again, I would do it differently. But I also have respect for who I was at the time that I made those decisions. And so the person that I was thought that was the best path. And plan A was better than plan B. And so that's where I went. And so to me, to spend a lot of time looking backward, regretting those decisions is a waste of time. You can't change them. So it's
Mm.
really, where am I right now? How do I improve my situation from where I am right now?
Yeah, yeah, that's the mindset you need to have. Otherwise, you'll you'll go crazy thinking about decision fatigue.
Right.
So I guess my question is, playing NFL football, broadcasting, being an author, motivational speaker, you said that, you want to have one overarching goal or one kind of theme for the long term, but you're generally reacting along the way and just thinking of how you can make the best of a certain situation. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that is fair.
So what's the overall goal with those, four things that I just mentioned about your career?
You
Like,
know,
how do they fit together, I guess,
yeah,
is what I'm trying to get at.
I think the common denominator of them is that I want to do things that align with my talents and interests and are opportunities for me to grow.
Mhm.
And so that's a broad framework through which I see opportunities that come in the door. So I run a company now called the Gala team, and we do nonprofit fundraisers. This year we'll do 140 of them here, mostly in the Denver area. And so it's benefit auctioneering. We are a team of auctioneers who go help nonprofits raise money during their big charity galas. Our company now, I started it in 2013. It was just me. I did 6 events that year. The next year I did 29. The year after that, I recruited 2 other auctioneers. We did 52. The next year was 71. And now we're going to do about 140. And we do all of the biggest events in Denver. We do the Denver Health Gala, Children's Hospital, the Denver Zoo, the Denver Symphony, or the Colorado Symphony, the Colorado Ballet, just all of the major events. And how have we been successful at this? Because it's the same to me. I'm looking at, what do I do? What can I do that aligns with my talents and abilities and my interests, and it allows me an opportunity to grow? And I feel like this auctioneering business really I found my true purpose in life. That I love helping these nonprofits. I love the impact that we have on our community, and it uses all of the skills that I've developed over my whole life: my speaking skills, my thinking skills, my decision making skills, all of that. And so I think I wouldn't have predicted, if I was setting a 10-year goal for myself, there's no point along the way that I would have predicted become an auctioneer and build a successful auctioneering business. That would have never been on my list. But because my mind is open, as soon as this opportunity to learn how to I got to do a couple of auctions, and I was like, I really like this. And this aligns nicely with what my talents are. And I just started doing more of it, and I was able to build a business out of it.
Could you explain how the auctioneering business works? I'm just not super familiar with it, so I think it'd be
Sure.
helpful.
Sure. So big nonprofits like the Denver Public Schools Foundation, they hold a big charity fundraiser. They invite 1,000 people into a ballroom. During that event, they're going to do various types of fundraising. They might have a silent auction, items laid out on a table that you can write down a bid on those items. They will might have a live auction where somebody's standing up in front saying, "Hey, we're going to sell this trip to Mexico, and we're going to
Mhm.
start the bidding at $1,000. Now we got 2,000, now 3,000." And so you have that, and then you have what's called a paddle raiser, which is just where we ask people for support. Who'd like to donate $10,000? Raise your paddle if you'd like to do that. Then who'd like to donate 5,000? Then 2,500, then 1,000, and we work our way down. And so those are the three main fundraising elements. Night of event fundraising. That's what my company does. We help them plan and execute that type of fundraising.
Awesome. And I mean, it sounds like if you're working with so many nonprofits, they're all going to a good cause. So you're doing something that you enjoy, and you're doing good in the process of doing so.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah. So what skill set was needed for you? And you said that this was kind of like you finding your passion, right? Going into auctioneering. What skill set did you need to be successful in this business, and which of those were transferable from your previous experiences?
So I feel that all of my previous experiences were training me for this particular job.
Mhm.
That the skills that I need stage and crowd skills. I need to be comfortable on a microphone in front of an audience. I'm doing a live auction and a paddle raiser. It requires a lot of quick thinking, and quick decision making. So all of the practice I had in the NFL of the ball gets snapped, and now you're moving as fast as you can and making decisions as fast as you can, and the other guy is also making decisions, and you've got to manage that, all of that. I feel like that has trained me for what I do on the stage. My 20 years being in the media business, being on TV, has trained me about how to present, how to be clear, how to be concise, how to do all of those things. My business experiences that I've had over since I became an adult have taught me how to start a business, how to run a business, how to manage employees. I have a team of 17 people that I'm leading now, and the way that I lead my team is all stuff that I learned from coaches in the NFL about teamwork and how you encourage people and how you empower people and how you develop people and how you help them continue to grow and achieve the things that they want to do. And so, yeah, I feel like there's everything that was put into my satchel as I went along. All these lessons that I learned, I'm constantly pulling out of that satchel to apply them to the things that I'm doing right now.
Hmm. Hmm. And that sounds like it fits really well within your kind of framework of long-term goal, know what I want to do, but reacting along the way, right? Because you're using so many of those skills and you're pulling them out of your satchel, to borrow your words, and applying them to your latest
That's
endeavor.
that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yes.
To go back to, I guess, in your career, at what point did you start writing? At what point did you become an author?
I started writing defensively when I was in back like fifth grade. My older sister, would babysit when my parents would go out, and she would write these notes about everything that I did. And so she was, I have a younger sister also. So my older sister would babysit me and my younger sister. So she would write these letters that would say, um, Reggie took a Coke out of the fridge, even though I told him he couldn't have one. Reggie turned off the TV when Gwen was trying to watch the TV. Reggie wouldn't go to bed when I told him he was time to go to bed. And so I would just she said, I'm writing a note to mom and dad. I'm like, I don't care. So she's writing her note. I go to bed. The next day, and when I get up in the morning, my dad is now has this piece of paper and he's like, all right, Reggie. So I hear that you got a Coke without asking for permission. Is that true? I'm like, that was yesterday, dude. I don't remember. But I would get a spanking because of the things that my sister wrote down on this piece of paper. And so I don't really recall doing this. I mean, I'm old enough to recall it. I vaguely do, but my parents told me about it. They said I started writing my own letters. And so my sister would say, I'm writing a letter to mom and dad. And I would say, I am too. And I'd write my explanation for why I did what I did or who had wronged me. And so my parents said they would come home, they'd have these dueling letters, they would laugh. Well, I got fewer spankings. And for me, I think early on in my life, I understood the power of the written word. I almost from the moment I learned how to read, I was an avid reader. I was an avid writer. I understood that if you can put things down on paper, you can convince people of things. If people put things on paper about you, they can convince other people of things. And so I had been passionate about it. When I was in sixth or seventh grade, I read the book Roots, and that was like my first real big book. And so now I'm an avid reader. I read every day, and then writing books was just kind of a natural um, development out of that. Just my passion
Mhm.
for reading and books led me to write some.
Mhm. So you you convincing your parents to give you less spankings because of your writing was ultimately what led you to realize, maybe there's something to this and how I can go convince people to do certain things.
Right, right. I wrote myself out of some spankings.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. That's definitely a unique answer. I haven't heard that one before. Um, what were some of the things that you were reading as a kid? You mentioned Roots, but like what were you reading as a kid? Fiction, nonfiction?
I was mostly reading fiction.
Uh-huh.
I all the normal stuff. I read a whole series, the Encyclopedia Brown series. I love those. I loved the Nancy Drew series as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I don't recall exactly all the standard stuff, but I just read all the time. Just whatever was in
Mhm.
front of me, I was reading it.
I asked because it seems like based on I haven't gotten a chance to read your books, but based on what I know, it seems like they're pretty varied topics, right? Like they're not all about football, and one of them was about political commentary from the perspective of an ant colony.
Right.
So I just asked because it seems like your writing style is pretty unique, and you're writing these stories from different perspectives as well. So I thought that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and if I get interested in something, I read a lot about it, and then I want to write something about it. And so one of the books I wrote was called Fourth and Fixed, about a crime family fixing NFL games. And I just been learning a lot about the NFL and trying to figure out, could somebody fix an NFL game? And so then my novel was like, this is how you might do it. Then I read all this stuff about homeowners associations and the conflicts that are happening out there with the people following HOA rules. And so I just read a lot of stuff, and then wrote a novel called My Wife's Boyfriend and Our Feud with the Highland Ranch Homeowners Association. And, and it was just a funny book about a marriage that's falling apart while they battle with the HOA board.
Mm,
When the Gulf War started in Iraq, and I watched a random news conference with George W. Bush, and I just realized watching that news conference, I was like, wow, this war is going to happen. Like, enough rhetoric has been said, enough man and material have been moved into the region. This war is going to happen. And it made me really curious about what causes wars to happen, and and how do nations know when they're going to go to war. And so that led me to go back to school. I went and got a master's degree in global studies from the University of Denver, and I wrote that novel, The Colony, A Political Tale, as my master's thesis. And it's
huh.
an allegory about two tribes of ants, the army ants of the Alpha Z tribe and
Mhm.
the leafcutter ants of Antistan. And it's how the Alpha Z attacks Antistan and gets control of this fungus that they grow deep below their mounds. And they can't just go in and take it. They've got to subjugate this mound and get them to keep producing it so they can keep taking it. And so it's just a metaphor about how the powerful nations in the world dominate the weaker nations.
I like the name Antistan.
Yeah,
It's very fitting for where your inspiration came about.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So it sounds like you really just believe in, like, if there's anything that I'm curious about, I will just dive right in and try to learn about it.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And I don't yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think that's a lesson that the audience and I can definitely take something away from, right? Because a lot of times if you're curious, you get bogged down in what you're doing day to day and you just forget to spend enough time on it. So I really commend you for going back to school. And what was it again that you studied? Political science?
global studies
Global
is
science.
officially international studies, basically.
And where did you go back to school?
University of Denver.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
And this wasn't the first book you had written. You'd written a book about NFL games being fixed potentially.
right.
Is that based on a true story? What was that inspired by?
No, it wasn't based on a true story, but it is based on a true potential. The NFL has an organization called NFL Security, made up mostly of former FBI agents, and their sole job is to make sure that the game is clean, that criminal interests aren't influencing the outcome of games. Well, as soon as I learned that they existed, I was like, wow. And I became friends with the Broncos NFL security guy. I'd sit next to him on the plane when we were traveling. I'd sit next to him in the cafeteria when we were eating, and I was just peppering him with questions all the time.
Mhm.
What did you do in the NFL? Or, I'm sorry, in the FBI, and what kind of things are you guys looking for? And I was just fascinated by it, to the point that I told him I want to write a book about this, and that became that book.
And this was while you were playing for the Broncos?
The book was published after my career was over, but yes,
Uh-huh.
the research for it started while I was playing.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I would imagine I mean don't get I mean I've never been a professional athlete in my life or anything like that. Not even close, but I would imagine a lot of people weren't spending their time peppering these guys with questions.
Yeah, that's true. But it's a lot like you. Is your name pronounced Arjun?
Arjun. Yep.
Arjun. Okay,
Mhm.
it's a lot like you. So you've got this podcast, and I can tell from talking to you, you're a curious person. You are curious about many different things, and you started this podcast and you interview people, and you prick your curiosity, and you learn things. And so to me, that's all that I have. And I feel like being curious is one of the most valuable traits that we can have as human beings, because it
Mhm.
will lead you so many places. A lack of curiosity will just kind of leave you stuck where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head with the entire reason I'm doing this thing in the first place, right? It's just like genuinely curious about a variety of things, and I have a hard time picking one of them. So I figured I'd just reach out to people like you and try to have them explain little bits of it to me. So
That's
I
great.
appreciate it. To your point on curiosity and how that can be a good driver of a purposeful life, right? What I wanted to ask you is, have you ever been, I guess, what are your motivations? Have you ever been motivated by money? I mean, you've clearly done very well for yourself, but have you ever been motivated by money or status or anything? Or what have your motivations been? Has it genuinely just been, I'm curious about this, I'm going to go learn from it and react to whatever opportunities come my way? It sounds like that's what it is, but
That's a large part of it. Of course, I'm somewhat motivated by money.
yeah.
But I feel like it was a blessing for me that I was in the NFL. My first job out of college was in the NFL, and it helped me understand I'm not motivated by money. I like making money,
Yeah.
but the money itself isn't motivating enough. Once you get beyond, if you have enough money to take care of your basic needs and the things that you want, it becomes less and less meaningful. And I know that's, it's a ridiculous thing to say because I know so many people need money, but but for me, it's like I need to find things that give me meaning. And when I started my auction business, for example, I was doing keynote presentations for corporations, and where they're to them, money is an I'm not even really negotiating with them. I tell them a price, they say okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. What's the
to
number?
Yeah, exactly. To now, I'm going to do this work with nonprofits who have these really tight budgets. And the first year of my business, I'm generating hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue in the events that I'm doing, that I'm personally performing. But I only paid myself a salary of $37,000 the
Hmm.
first year I started my business. And my wife was like, "Hey, wait a second. I mean, you're gonna stop doing these corporate events and start doing this." And it was like, yeah, because this is I'm really passionate about this. And then the next year I paid myself about $50,000. And and it's grown over time, but I still don't pay myself a ton of money. And I am transparent with my team. We look at our financials every week. Every Monday, we look at our bank balances, our balance sheet, all of that together as a team. They see my salary at the end of the year. And it's important for me to show them through my actions that, yeah, I am not taking the resources of the company and just putting them in my pocket. I'm paying myself a reasonable salary that's commensurate with the salaries that they're making, and we're in this together. We're trying to make a difference in the world. And so for me, it was I had a chance to learn early that money is important. You have to have money to have security, but money isn't the thing that motivates me.
Hmm. Hmm. That's awesome. I really I really can appreciate the transparency, because I've definitely heard a lot of people saying similar things, but in practice, their employees might, or their employees or people that they're surrounded by, or whoever works for them, might not feel the same way, because you have no idea how much they're making, or they're making a ridiculous amount of money and you're getting paid by the hour to do things that are bringing them a ton of value, right? So I really appreciate that. I bet that certainly motivates people to want to, stay stay with the company and kind of focus on the end goal, if you will.
Yeah, it removes a distraction, and I think that that's true, and that's why I started doing it because, um, you know, we're successful, but we're running on a pretty small margin.
Mhm.
We don't charge these nonprofits a lot of money, and so about 4 years ago, I just said, you know what, I should just open this up, and let's every Monday we have a report that we look at, and all of our full time employees participate, and we just look at the numbers, and so they see it every week. They know what it is, and it has just removed a distraction from our company.
Mhm. Mhm. And then you mentioned that at an early age, you learned that money was obviously important, right? Like, no one's going to sit here and tell you that money is not important, especially when things are as expensive as they are today. Money is
Yes.
absolutely important, but you learned that it shouldn't be your primary motivator. So what I guess what I'm getting at is, how did you learn that? How did you did were you is that a value that you were taught growing up?
Yeah, I think it was a value that I was taught growing up, and we didn't have much money when I was growing up. When I got in the NFL, I made the league minimum every year, but I felt like I was rich. My rookie year, I made $70,000. That was the league minimum, and I was like, wow, they're paying me $70,000 just to play football. And then the next year, I made $125,000. The most I ever made in any one year was $300,000, and I just felt like I am so blessed to be making the money that I'm making. It's not the millions that my teammates were making, but I felt like, man, I'm lucky at this young age to be able to make this money. And I started to understand I like the money, and I like having this nest egg, but the money itself doesn't move me. And so I started doing things in the community. I started volunteering with all these charities, and to just start to find a meaning, a purpose. How can I do something that makes me feel like I'm making a difference? Because over here, just playing football and getting paid a lot of money for it doesn't feel very meaningful to me. It feels pretty shallow.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm aware of the reality. Only rich people can say that money doesn't matter
Yeah.
because they've already solved all their money problems. And
Yep.
and that's and
Yep.
that's true. I want to be cognizant of that. But it is also to understand that once you get beyond meeting your needs,
Mm.
yeah, the more money often doesn't create more happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome too, especially like, you mentioned when you said 70,000, 100,000, 150,000, and 300,000. That's like a tenth of what I would have imagined you were making as an
Right.
NFL player,
Right.
but that's still a lot of money, right? Like $300,000 is quite a bit of money. And clearly your motivation was to find something that was purposeful to you, that you felt fulfillment in.
Yeah.
So from a young person's perspective, and this is something that people my age or my friends would always ask, and like, how did you find what was your purpose? How did you find something that was purposeful to you, where you would make money as a byproduct of your curiosity, and just going after something that you're genuinely passionate about? How did you find that thing, and how should people look to do the same in their own lives?
So that is a very good question. It's
Loaded question for sure, but
it
you're the man
is.
for the job.
Right. Yeah, I think that I knew that I'm a communicator at heart, whether it's writing, TV, radio, whatever it is. That's at a very basic level. That's who I am. I'm a communicator, and
Mhm.
so I continually sought out opportunities where I could communicate, and if I could get paid for it as well, it's like, hey, great! Now I'm doing this thing that I love to do, and I'm making a living at it. I think that we have seen in this generation, the generation. My son's 18. I don't. How old are you? 28 ish.
26.
Okay, 26.
Yep. Yep.
Um, you're in. I put you in the generation with my son, and everybody up to say 35. I am blown away by how creative your generation is and the things that they have come up with. I mean, we have now, you look at the landscape of the wealthiest companies in the world, and it's Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon. The businesses that didn't exist 25 years ago are now the biggest businesses on the planet. We have Uber and Lyft, and all these apps, and all these TikTok and things that people create, and then people who make their living as content producers, that
Mhm.
they're on YouTube playing a video game and doing it with such interesting commentary that people want to follow them and watch them play this video game. Or people who are influencers about makeup or how to do your hair or whatever it is. When I watch some of these things on YouTube, I'm just like blown away by the creativity and the ability to turn their passion into a way for them to make money. And I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, to your point, like, the universe of potential careers has gotten a lot broader than it was probably 25, 30, 40 years ago. Like, people are literally sitting at home streaming Twitch video games and providing commentary, and they're making a killing doing it just by being themselves, right? So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see.
It is. It really is.
Is your son like you? Is he a communicator? Is he extroverted? Does he kind of have your personality traits?
No, he doesn't. Yeah, if he's not a communicator. He's a pretty good football player,
Yeah.
and he's we're hoping he's going to be heading off to college in the fall. But he's really good with his hands. He's very smart. He's mathematically he's very smart. He still doesn't know his times tables, but if you ask him
Right.
to figure
Right.
out
Neither do I.
the if you ask him to figure out the volume of a pyramid, he can do that, and that's easy for him. And so it'll be interesting to see what he does, but it'll be
Yeah.
different than what I've done.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So you're not necessarily kind of guiding him or putting him on a path. You're kind of just giving him guardrails, so to speak, and just letting him go wherever
Yeah.
he goes.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like, where does his talents and interest line up, and what can he do with that? And so, we want to help direct him as much as we can toward positive outlets for whatever talents he has. But beyond that, it's like, yeah, whatever he chooses in his life, we just want him to be successful and happy.
Hmm. Hmm. That's awesome. I did want to transition back to the topic of goal setting, just because, obviously coming from somebody who's very accomplished and successful in their own career and is kind of known for being a goal setting and kind of behavior changing guy. How do you, when people approach you and ask you, you know, and they tell you that they struggle with motivation, like what's your advice for people who struggle with motivation and discipline?
The single simplest thing that I think any of us can do, and I'm subject to this too. Let's not make it out that every goal that I set for myself, I'm just so disciplined and I go out and do it. I mean, I have a goal to lose weight and I don't do it. So, let's be realistic. But the single simplest thing is shorten your timeline.
Hmm.
So if people get demoralized because they say, I want to lose 20 pounds. And so then they're eating a salad and they're drinking water and they're doing everything. And if they don't start losing right away, they just get demoralized. And I say, set your target shorter. Your goal is to lose 20 pounds. Great. That's your goal. You wrote it down. Now forget about that. Today, you're going to eat a salad. You're going to drink nothing but water, no sodas. You're going to have a healthy dinner, and you're not going to eat anything after 8 p.m. That's what you're going to do today. And when you get to the end of today, and when you've done that, you should celebrate your success because you did that today yourself. And when you wake up tomorrow, you're only going to decide, what am I going to do today? When that brownie shows up at lunch, you can say no to any one brownie, right? You can say that, hey, listen, brownie, you go free. You're
Not today.
not today. I am setting you free. If your cousin shows up at dinner, I can't make any promises, but this one, I'm setting you free. And you
Mhm.
said no to that brownie, and you should give yourself a pat on the back. That's success. That these little things, you have to start celebrating the process, not just the outcome. And businesses know this. Businesses have long term goals, but they also understand they have processes that they need to repair. And when they make a repair to their process, they celebrate that. Yeah, we just fixed that thing. And they know that that process is then going to fix their long term goal or help them achieve their long term goal. We, as individual human beings, need to adopt that more and celebrate the small victories.
Mhm. Celebrate the small victories. Be more focused on the short term with your long term mindset,
Correct.
in conjunction with your long term mindset.
Correct.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. This is definitely, you know, contrary to conventional wisdom, but I think it could work for a lot of people. And I really appreciate your time today.
Well, it's a really enjoyable experience because you are a genuinely curious person and you're a great interviewer, you're a great listener. I could tell you're a good salesperson because I can tell that you listen to your clients. And yeah, it's a very enjoyable experience to be on your podcast.
I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Reggie. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
awesome.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot.